Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to look into some new Sly Flourish stuff going on. We have a whole bunch of crowdfunding campaigns. Everybody's been waiting until the new year started, and I guess waiting until February to jump on the crowdfunding campaigns. So we have, I think, 5 different crowdfunding campaigns we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about a big topic called We All Won. It is crossed the 3-year anniversary of the release of the 5.1 SRD in the Creative Commons at the end of the OGL Catastrophe. And it is a really interesting time now that those 3 years have passed. We're going to look at what has happened since then and what has happened even more recently in the aftermath of that event. Today's tip is going to be, because of X, you know why. How to use second-person narrative to draw characters into the fiction of your game. And we're going to cover more questions from the Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. So last week on Sly Flourish, I published the article, The Many TTRPG Hobbies. I also did a Readings and Reflections podcast on this for Hero Tier patrons of Sly Flourish, where we talk about how there are many different RPG hobbies. There's not just one hobby. There's not just the game itself. And it's totally cool to be into lots of different RPG hobbies, even if they don't necessarily all manifest as true value to the game you're running at the table. Sometimes they're just fun. The RPG business punditry is one such hobby. Fancy tabletop terrain is another hobby. Painting miniatures is another hobby. Cosplay is another hobby. There's lots of surrounding hobbies. They're all very cool. You don't need anyone's permission to enjoy any of these hobbies. And we talk about a lot of that in this article. The next week's Sly Flourish article is using slashes and X's to track damage. This is a little trick. I like these little tricks to make it a little easier, especially if you're playing a game that has a lot of high hit point values. I was running a 20th level 5e game where we had 3 different versions of 5e, and we regularly had monsters with more than 600 hit points. And tracking damage was difficult. I switched to a new style influenced by Elizabeth at Patchwork Paladin for using slashes and X's to track damage. This is actually similar to how Index Card RPG uses hearts to track damage. And the idea is every 5 damage they take, you make a little tick mark. Every 10 damage, you cross that tick mark to turn it from a 5 to a 10. You can keep a little separate tally for 1Z and 2Z damage, or you can just round up and down if you want to. It's okay. And tracking damage that way. I found it to be way easier than trying to keep track of specific numbers. To me, it's way easier than subtracting hit points down. It's way easier to add hit points or add damage up. But it's even faster to these X's and slashes. And I've started doing it I'm running a 12th level Tales of the Valiant game now, a lot of monsters with a lot of hit points, and doing the slashes and X's has become very, very fast. So this is an article where I talk about using slashes and X's to track damage, which is a nice, easy, fast notary trick for keeping track of damage. So you can see that on Sly Flourish. It will be emailed out to the Sly Flourish newsletter. You should totally subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't. There's a link in the show notes. And it will go out as a Readings and Reflections podcast on Thursday this week. So those are the two articles that I've done. A couple weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, I released a batch of the first chapters of a new project that I'm working on. I've got some great feedback. Lots of people sent me awesome feedback to help influence my third draft as I carve through it. I'm about to, this next week, release the second big batch. Another, I think it's 12-ish chapters, all about, well, I'm not going to tell you what it's all about. You got to go find out. But it's a whole big new chunk of material for people to read. It's in PDF, and I'm very eager to hear what people think of this. So that's out. That's going to be out to Hero Tier patrons of Sly Flourish. This new batch of stuff. It's actually already there. If you go to your Hero Tier page, you can see there is batch 2 has already been posted. As soon as I queue up a announcement of it, I also put it up on the rewards page. So if you want to stay up on rewards, you can look at your rewards page regularly and see stuff that stealthily gets added there. But I always announce it eventually, and this will get, I think, announced on Wednesday. So we had a whole pile of crowdfunding campaigns. I'm going to cut through a few of them. We're going to talk about a few of them. Rock and Roar is done by my friend Joe at Inkwell Ideas. This is a cool classic rock, pop, and metal-inspired monster book for Old School Essentials and Shadowdark, available in PDF and in print. Really cool style and design, very funny. The Twisted Sisters, War Pigs, Man in the Mirror, so Sledgehammer, right? And all monsters that were influenced by various classic rock things. The Iron Maiden, of course, Eyes Without a Face, It's like a weird beholder thing. Lots of neat stuff. So very cool book. Again, designed for both Shadowdark and for old school essentials. So definitely in the OSE style, and definitely the aesthetic of it fits that style. Really cool stuff. I always, Joe and I are good friends. We have lunch regularly and talk about all this stuff. So I was very excited to hear about this project when he was talking about standing it up. And now it is available for kickstarting. So please check it out. You can find a link down in the show notes for the Rock and Roar Old School Monsters of Rifts and Ruin. Very neat book. So check that out down in the show notes. Delve by Bob Worldbuilder. I left my copy upstairs. Bob sent me a preview copy of this book, pre-release copy of this book, and I skimmed through it. Under the Shadow of Helfast Spire is Bob Worldbuilder's own sort of take on a Cursed Scroll. So if you are familiar with the Cursed Scroll zines published by Arcane Library for Shadowdark, you can, this is very much along that same style. It's got new character options. It has a kind of overland area that you can explore and like a hex map, and then a specific dungeon and monsters and treasure and everything in there. Almost exactly the same kind of style. I think it's like 64 pages. And print, both print and PDF, really cool artwork, really cool design, lots of Shadowdark. So there's 2 different Shadowdark projects, if you notice. Here's a cool little video that he does. And I have seen the preview copy. The preview copy was not fully complete yet, but looks really, really cool. And it is, got a lot of neat things going on there. So if you were looking for another sort of Cursed Scroll-like zine made by Bob Worldbuilder, check this out. This is the Under the Shadow of Helfast Spire, a Shadowdark RPG zine. But really what it is like another third-party Cursed Scroll for Shadowdark. So looks really neat. There is, in fact, a one-click preview here because I was talking to him about it. Here it is. Click here for the free PDF sample. All right, you got samples right here. We'll go with pages. So as always, what I recommend you do is I recommend you check out the samples and see if it's the kind of material you want. See if you're excited about it. Take a look at it. Lots of neat stuff in here. Really good art, really good design. Cool stuff. I dig it. So check that out. And that is the Under the Shadow of Helfast Spire zine for Shadowdark. Check that out. Blades 68. If you are familiar with Blades in the Dark, the Blades 68 crowdfunding campaign, they're doing very well. Almost 290,000, 3,900 backers for Blades 68. Blades 68 takes the concept of the Duskvol world of Blades in the Dark and brings it up to sort of 1968-like atmosphere. So you have sort of spies and, 1968 things. Groovy. Time to get groovy and get dangerous and get weird with Blades 68. So it is a new hardcover book published by Evil Hat, specifically a new style of game. Looks really cool. I ran a Blades in the Dark campaign before. I had some trouble running it. It wasn't really my style, but a lot of folks, I love the design of Blades in the Dark. I think the book is really cool. And I think for those who are interested in sort of spy fiction, crime capers, some weird sci-fi sort of stuff going on here, it's sort of a reimagining of the timelines of the Duskvol sort of, weird magic and eldritch stuff going on, escalated up to like what it would be like if that had been taking place in 1968. I think it's a really cool idea, and you can check it out down below you can check it out in the show notes to back the Blades 68, Blades in the Dark reimagining. Looks really neat. Looks like really neat stuff. Nimble 5e. I did a spotlight on Nimble 5e before. Nimble 5e has a new reprint that they are doing. They're also doing very well. 2,000 backers, $333,000 as of that stake. Nimble, I think it's just called Nimble. I don't know that they actually call it Nimble 5e anymore. There was a Nimble 5e, which was sort of the preview book. Now it's just called Nimble. Nimble is a take on 5e that makes it more lightweight, faster to play. Things like you don't roll attack rolls, you just roll for damage. Whole kind of different take on high fantasy RPGs. It's got a 3-action system similar to like how Pathfinder 2 has a 3-action system. It's not intended to be either too light or too heavy. So pretty cool. You can see some previews. I don't know if the BackerKit has a preview of it or not, but there are I think there are free previews that you can find that kind of show you what Nimble is like. the thing that immediately jumped out to me when I looked at it is the production value. This is one of the many games that I saw over the last, over 2025, where the production value was really, really high. Like, I was really impressed. For me, the game itself, there were a couple things that I bounced off of when I'm looking at lots of the games that I can play. Things like fixed distances for movement, specifically square-based distances. I kind of like a more freer form, abstract style distance. The 3-action economy is very interesting, but I actually prefer a 1-action economy. I kind of like it when you just have one thing. So, but still looks very, very cool. I would definitely want to play this game. I don't know that I want to run it yet. If I played it and I love it, I would absolutely, of course, like decide to run it. But they are doing a reprint. So if you did not get in on the earlier one, this is a good opportunity to get a bunch of different extras, bunch of different stuff that you can pick up to pick up the Nimble system. Very well loved by many people. $40 for the full PDF set, which includes all 3 books, a monster book, a GM book, and a player guide. Then there's a bunch of expansions for it, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. So there's a whole pile of different tiers for Nimble. Again, I would recommend doing some research, taking a look at the game, seeing some of the free samples that they offer, deciding if it's the game for you, and if it looks like something you're interested in and you think you're going to run it, then definitely check out the crowdfunding campaign for Nimble. So, Numenera Cypher. I almost didn't spotlight this one because I think that, and having read the campaign itself, I think there's actually a pretty narrow group that this campaign applies to. And there's a few reasons why I'm not backing it. One is, this would be the 4th time I bought Numenera. I already bought the original Numenera BackerKit, or when it was a crowdfunding campaign. I think it was one of the first Kickstarters. I bought it then. I bought the Destiny and Discovery one. I bought the Numenera box set. So I literally had on my thing, I've now given 2 of the 3 away, but I already had 3 versions of Numenera on my library. Now I'm just down to my Discovery and Destiny books. So I felt like, well, I don't necessarily need to buy Numenera again. I don't need it a 4th time. I also ran a 1-year Numenera campaign already for my RPG group, which is the most open to running other games. We played it, we enjoyed it. I had a really wonderful campaign. I think the story was great, but my players kind of bounced off the system a bit. Now, this Numenera is based on their new version of the Cypher rules, and I think the new Cypher rules could address some of the things that my players had issues with when we played it ourselves. However, those rules aren't released yet. And I think it's a little weird that they're doing a crowdfunding campaign for a new version of Numenera that requires that you have the new rules, but the new rules themselves aren't out yet. So I actually don't know if those new rules are better for myself and my group. And I don't want to then buy another source book on top of that on the assumption that it is. But also, it's very unlikely that I'm going to be running a new Numenera campaign anytime soon. I don't know that I really want to buy a new Numenera if I don't know that I like the core books yet. I think it's, to me, it feels a little early to be doing a new Kickstarter for a new version of Numenera based on a system that that's required to play it that we haven't actually seen yet. That's a little bit much. So why am I recommending? Why am I even talking about it? Because I don't. One thing is, like, there's a couple reasons why I don't talk about other crowdfunding campaigns. One is I don't know about it, or honestly, like, there's just so many of them coming out, I can only talk about so many. So me not talking about it isn't me saying it's bad. However, if I look at a campaign and I study it and I go, yeah, it's really not for me, and it's really not the kind of thing I want to recommend, I'm just not going to talk about it, right? I'm not going to bring it up and say, don't back it. That doesn't make any sense. So why am I talking about this one? There's really only one reason that I'm talking about this one. And that reason is there are tiers in this campaign. There are pledge levels in this campaign that include the entire library of previous Numenera stuff, right? There's an entire set of hundreds of their previous products that they're packing in along with these campaigns. So this is where I get to the narrow slice of who this campaign might be for. This campaign is for, one situation. You don't already own Numenera in any form. Or when you did get it, you got it for pretty cheap. Maybe you only got the PDFs as part of like a humble bundle or a bundle of holding or something like that. And maybe that's how you got it. But you don't have the physical books and you're interested in getting the physical books. That would be a reason to consider this campaign. And 2, you want to run it for your group. You're eager for it. You know that they would be willing to play it. You're eager to play it. That would be a reason to do it. And you don't own any of the previous Numenera stuff. If those are all the case, this is actually a really good way to get a giant pile of Numenera stuff, including brand new fresh books on their brand new fresh system, all in one campaign. So that's a pretty good deal, right? Like that to me is the thing where you're like, okay, that's not a bad reason. The value of it's pretty good, right? If you get the the starter set, I think it's like the print and PDF of the setting only is $55. That's pretty reasonable, right? But when you start to add in like the extra books, there's an adventure book, there's a monster book, and then there's the kind of core setting book for it. You also can get these other additional things in there. But if you already own a bunch of these things already, like I do, if you've already delved into them, and there have been numerous Numenera bundles of holding and humble bundles in the past that included lots of their material, and those are really good deals. Right. And this one's probably a year and a half out before you're actually going to get the books. So you have to think, I have a group that it would be interested in playing Numenera, but not for like a year and a half. And everything I've read about this new Cypher rules excite me. And I don't have any of this stuff, then this is the campaign for you. But that's a pretty narrow one. I myself am not backing it. My thing, I did back the new Cypher books. I think I backed them digitally. I don't know if I got the physical ones because again, it's like I've already run a group through it. And I've got so many other RPGs that are on my list that I haven't played yet. Do I really see myself jumping into that again? So that's a big question. And then there's a talk of backward compatibility. The intention of Cypher was that it was backward compatible, which means I should be able to use my old Numenera stuff, which is also why they're including a bunch of new Numenera stuff in here. So that's a big question. So again, I would say it's a very narrow slice where I think that this is actually a really good campaign. And it pretty much is, I'm really interested in Numenera and I don't already own any of these things. If those are the case, this is probably a pretty good deal. If you already own a lot of Numenera, like I do, I would wait. Right, I would wait and then see how it goes and take a look at the Cypher system and find a group that's actually interested in playing, and then I might go pick it up because you can always buy this stuff later. And there will always be bundles of holding and humble bundles that include a lot of this material, so you can certainly get that too. So that would be the only reason I would bring it up, and it's really the only reason I'm bringing it up on the show. I love Monte Cook Games. I think they put out outstanding products. I really loved my Numenera campaign. I think Numenera and Cypher is my favorite system to GM. I think it's got the easiest tools and system for me to GM. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. But boy, a lot of my goals when I'm looking at other RPGs is how do I make it as simple to play those games as it was to play Cypher, right? And play Numenera in particular. So that's one of the reasons I bring it up. The quality of the materials are always really top notch with MCG. Their books are beautiful. They look great. They're outstanding stuff. But for me, the hard part is like, do I really need more books for Numenera when I don't have any intention of running a Numenera game anytime soon? The answer for me, and also I own a ton of it, the answer for me was no. But the answer might be different for you. So take a look at it, see what you think. And if you were in that state of, I'm really excited about Numenera, really excited about Cypher, I have a group who's interested in playing, and I've never bought any of this stuff before, then this could be the campaign for you. Here's a quote from an article. You're going to hear people say that they won and we lost because making your voices heard forced us to change our plans. Those people will be only half right. They won, and so did we. That kind of clumsy quote, which has been quoted all over the place ever since, because it was one of a series of very sort of ham-fisted, sort of markety speak to try to convince the RPG community that deauthorizing the OGL was a good thing, came from an article published in 13 January 2023. So 3 years ago, by a couple of weeks ago, called An Update on the Open Gaming License. That quote, we're going to get into a little, just touching on the history of the OGL. But the fun part of that quote, that we all won, I look back on it now, 3 years later, and I say, maybe it was right. Maybe, did we all win? Out of the situation that occurred, did we all win? And I will tell you what the current state is. To me, as I see it, the current state, the RPG hobby is just awesome right now. It's maybe the best time that this hobby has ever had, and maybe the best time to have ever gotten into this hobby. There's only one point where I could say the hobby might have been healthier, and I almost don't want to talk about it because of how horrible it was everywhere else in the world, and that was during COVID. One of the things that my publisher friends and I have seen, and that we've seen in lots of data in lots of different places, is that generally speaking, the investment in RPGs was about 20 to 30% higher during COVID than it is now. However, now we have way better products than we had even then. A lot of times during COVID, products were getting made, but now we've got tons of them. You just saw all the different crowdfunding campaigns I was talking about. There are more fantastic well-produced, beautiful, fun RPGs out now than there have ever been. And there are many open licenses to allow publishers to continue to build different tools, different RPGs, different supplements for lots of different systems than we've ever had before. So I think it's kind of interesting to look back over the last 3 years from the point of the OGL catastrophe that happened back in late 2022, early 23, and see how the whole hobby has changed since then. In my opinion, way for the better. Did we all win? I think we all may have won. I think there's only one group that may not have won. And we're going to talk about that. So some quick disclaimers, because I'm going to be talking a lot about Wizards of the Coast. I want to make, and actually other companies too, I want to offer some disclaimers. I have worked with and been paid by Wizards of the Coast periodically over the past 15 years on numerous different activities. I regularly talk to the folks at Wizards of the Coast, and I get review copies of D&D products sent to me by Wizards of the Coast pretty regularly. So it's important for me to kind of state where I am. The same is true with other companies. I'm going to talk about Kobold Press. I have done work with Kobold Press in the past. I probably will do work with Kobold Press in the future. I've gotten review copies of lots of different things from lots of different RPG manufacturers. So it's important that you understand my own context, especially with the things that I'm going to say. All right, so it's a 3-year anniversary of the OGL catastrophe. Let's do a very quick summary. I don't want to rehash the whole OGL situation. I don't think a lot of people want me to rehash the whole OGL situation, but I'm going to go through it really quickly. So here's a quick summary that I wrote to be quick and fast to get through. Number one, in the year 2000, 26 years ago, Wizards of the Coast created the Open Gaming License and used it to publish the 3rd edition system reference document. This license in this document meant that people could write material compatible with the 3rd edition of D&D without a licensing fee, without having to get permission from Wizards of the Coast, and what we thought was a perpetual license, that would be a license agreement that they could not take back. You didn't have to take down your products if Wizards of the Coast decided to go against it. In 2016, 16 years later, Wizards of the Coast published the 5.1 system reference document, which basically extended the rules that were available for people to use under the Open Gaming License to the rules for the 5th edition version of D&D. And for 8 years, thousands of different 5e compatible products were published, including entire other systems like Level Up Advanced 5e, based on the material that was available under this system reference document, i.e. all of the rules that were, most of the rules that D&D 5th edition was based on, were published under that license. So Wizards of the Coast in 2016 said, yes, that license is good and we're going to continue to use it. They did not use it for 4th edition D&D, but they did use it for 5th edition D&D. In late 2022, I think it was like in November, December 2022, and early in 2023, Wizards of the Coast attempted to, quote unquote, deauthorize the OGL, something that the original creators of the OGL publicly stated they had no intention of anybody being able to do. The outcry from publishers, RPG fans was massive. It was so big that literally people stopped me on the street. I'm not kidding. I would be out with my wife taking a walk, and neighbors of ours would stop and go, "You're into D&D. What's going on with this OGL thing?" It was bananas how big it was. Business Insider's writing articles. Forbes is writing articles. There was a ton. Lynn Kodega, a writer for I think it was IO9, wrote a whole series of different articles covering and exposing what was going on with the OGL, and won an award for doing so. Yeah, Legal Eagle covered it. Was as Robert Tables brings up. In January 27, 2023, Wizards of the Coast completely turned around, releasing the 5.1 system reference document under the much more widely used and accepted Creative Commons Attribution license. This is a license used all over the internet from many, many different companies, big and large. Disney uses it. Google uses it. Tons of people. Wikipedia, all of Wikipedia is under this license. So this is a very well used, very well understood license that has been battle tested for 20 years. And they released it under that license and also said, we are not going to deauthorize the OGL. So they completely turned around on it. Since then, over the 3 years since then, Wizards of the Coast has released the 5.1 system reference document. These are the rules that D&D 5th edition 2014 were built on, under 5 languages under the Creative Commons: English, French, German, Italian, and Spanish. They also then, last year, released the 5.2 system reference document, which are all of the rules updates for D&D 2024, also under those 5 languages. So there are 10 different system reference documents released under the Creative Commons license by Wizards of the Coast for D&D 2014 and D&D 2024, meaning you can write material compatible with either of those systems without a license fee, without requiring anybody's permission, under very, very open use. All you have to do is attribute the fact that you are using their system reference document, and it's like one sentence that you can put in any product in order to make it. Fantastic turnaround. So, where are we today? Now it's been 3 years. What happened? And the truth is, we all won. That original statement, which also was kind of in the middle, and they hadn't yet fully gone back, but the reality is I think we all won. RPGs, in my opinion, have never been better. We have those 5.1 and 5.2 system reference documents, i.e. the rule sets, are available and open for any publisher to be able to write material for them. You can write a new magic item. You can write an entire RPG system, and many people have by using that Creative Commons license. Examples, Shadowdark uses that license. Lots of different groups are using those licenses in order to build the stuff they have. One thing that I think often gets missed with these reference documents, it's not about the specifics of the rules that they allow in there. It's about the general understanding that Wizards of the Coast has released a lot of the common terminology for D&D, terminology that has been used for 50 years, and said, we're not going to come after you if you use this terminology in your products. And examples of those terminology are like the 6 ability scores, the idea of hit points and armor class, the lists of spells, the lists of monsters, all of those things. It's not about the specific rules that they released, although those are very useful. It's about a recognition that those terms are now usable for everything. Old School Essentials can use them. Dolmenwood can use them. Shadowdark can use them. They can be used in lots of different ways for lots of different systems that might not have any direct compatibility with D&D 5th edition. So that is where it really is valuable that these licenses are out there. And now they're out there, which means we can just, it's tremendous on the kind of stuff that we can write. And almost immediately after the OGL crisis, while the OGL crisis was going on, and immediately afterwards, many publishers, including Kobold Press, including Arcane Library, including the creators of Dolmenwood and the creators of Old School Essentials, all said, well, we have to go our own way now. We got it. We're doing our own thing. Right? And it actually took some time. They all did it, and they all hung on to that, and they all kept doing that. And it took some time. And now we're starting to see the end results of that. That's why I think that this is kind of important to take a look at it now, is because now is when we're really seeing the output of what happened, right? That it wasn't like we saw immediate things happen at the time, but now it's been 3 years, and now we're seeing lots of things that kind of came out from this. I'm not sure that it's fair to say that these companies wouldn't have gone their own way anyway. I know many of them said, we already had intended to kind of make our own thing, but this accelerated our plans. I heard that a lot from a lot of different publishers. We already were thinking about it. Kelsey Dion was already thinking about Shadowdark. Kobold Press was already thinking about Tales of the Valiant. MCDM was already thinking about a game like Draw Steel. All of these things were already starting to occur, but this really kind of pushed them to say, we are on our own. Right? We're on our own, and we need to go our own way, and we're going to do it. And then it took a long time for them to do it, because it takes a long time to build entire RPGs. So now 3 years later, they're all out, right? They're all coming out. And here's just a short list. This isn't a complete list, but this is just a short list of the RPGs we have now. Dolmenwood, Daggerheart, Draw Steel, Shadowdark, Pirate Borg, Shadow of the Weird Wizard, 13th Age version 2, Nimble, Pathfinder 2e Revised, and Starfinder 2e. And lots others. Dragonbane, I think, came out during that time, right? With tons of different games from tons of different perspectives, and many that aren't anything like D&D at all, right? Many of them went their own way. Like it's kind of a stretch to look at Daggerheart and say it looks like D&D 5th edition. I don't think it looks like D&D 5th edition at all. Draw Steel, same kind of thing. Shadowdark looks a lot more. It looks D&D 5th edition like, but stripped way down in order to fit kind of old school style. But Dolmenwood doesn't look anything like 5th edition. And Pirate Borg doesn't look anything like 5th edition. So they really went their own direction, not only in kind of being open to the style, but also in the design of the games. And when you look at the breadth of those games, it takes my breath away when I look at how different these games are. I'm running 3 different games right now, regularly. I am running a Tales of the Valiant game, which is based on, this is Kobold Press's version of 5e. I am playing a Dragonbane game made by Free League, and I'm playing a Daggerheart game by Darrington Press. They are so wildly different. And sometimes it's difficult for me to like get my head around how different they all are and what style they're taking and what kind of approach they have to the game. Very different style. And then you look at these other ones and they also have a different style. And I think that's fantastic because it allows us to try so many different kinds of RPGs with so many different things that they bring to our table, and also pick the ones that we really like and say, I really love the style that this one has, right? And it's okay to say that other style isn't really for me. I know other people love it, but that style isn't really for me. We now have such a wide range of games that are all really well produced, really well supported, really well loved by lots of different people in the RPG community. I'm not even sure there's an RPG community. I think there's many, many different overlapping RPG communities, but that's a whole different topic for another time. It's great. It's just great. Right? The breadth of the games is wild. Most of the games have some kind of licenses as well. So almost all of these games recognize like, hey, we'd like you to be able to make stuff for this. Now, some of those licenses are actually relatively limited. And there's criticism against some of the companies for making licenses that aren't nearly as open as what Wizards of the Coast did for D&D, right? A lot of these are not saying, hey, here's like a system reference document that's under a Creative Commons license. I, of course, love it when they do that. But many of the other ones say, no, look, like if you're going to make something compatible with us, there's kind of more stringent ideas on what you can and cannot do. Shadowdark is an example. Shadowdark has a relatively good license for being able to write Shadowdark compatible stuff, but it cannot be a full copy of the things that it have in Shadowdark. There's complaints about like, well, Shadowdark was built on a very open license that allowed you to do everything, and then they limited the license for the stuff you do for them. That's true. However, if you want to make a game that's similar to Shadowdark, you don't need Shadowdark's permission. You can go straight to those 5.1, 5.2 SRDs and make a different game. You can even make one that's compatible with Shadowdark. You might want to be careful about how you say compatibility with Shadowdark, but you can make a whole separate thing and say, hey, by the way, our stuff works because the math is there, and the math can connect because at the top level, everything is 5th edition. So many of them have those license agreements, and they have a lot of ability, gives you a lot of ability and a lot of freedom to kind of write the stuff that you want to write for these games. It's not perfect, right? I wouldn't say that the license situation among all of these games is perfect. There are some where it's like, can they take it back? It's like, it seems like it. And a lot of them are bespoke licenses where they're written by a lawyer for one company, and you're like, yeah, but it's never been tested, right? That has never, we don't know exactly how that works. No one's ever been pushed back against it. So what do we do there? So that's a question. So there's only one. I was trying to like do some testing of this theory that the things are really, really great now. Is there any arguments that no, because of the OGL, things went bad? And I heard a couple of things, but one of them that I've heard was the centralization of the RPG community around D&D was really good. And now that it's all split up, everybody's kind of off on their own doing their own thing. And there's a lack of centrality around D&D and D&D adventures and D&D campaign settings and D&D stuff like there used to be before. I think it's a strength. I think your different points of view are going to come there. I think it is a strength. I think we are in a way better position to have lots of different RPGs we can jump to, lots of different groups that we can get involved in. I've got 1 million Discord servers that I belong to for all of these games. Or I can go and talk to people about Tales of the Valiant, or I can go in another one and talk about Daggerheart, or I can go in another one and talk about Dolmenwood, right? I've got all these different communities I can belong to. And I can talk to about whatever game I'm interested. I can dive in and just kind of lurk. I can go talk to people about it. I can get involved in the community. I would say, like, I think I'm kind of involved in the Shadowdark community, right? I talk a lot about Shadowdark. I've run a lot of Shadowdark, right? I talk to Michael and Kelsey at Shadowdark, and, we talk about lots of things. So that one I'm kind of more involved in. The people at Tales of the Valiant, again, I've written parts of Tales of the Valiant, so I'm kind of involved in that one. And then there's some where I'm just kind of like on the periphery, kind of looking in. And that's cool, right? I don't think we need to have centralization around one product, one brand, and certainly one company. I don't think that's healthy, because I wonder, and this is that, like, you can't go back. There isn't an alternate history where this didn't happen. If it hadn't been the OGL, would it have been something else that would have made us kind of upset about being focused around D&D, right? Could Wizards have done something else? Maybe. I don't know. We don't know what it would have looked like if they hadn't done it. I feel like things are way stronger now than they used to be. Who didn't win? I say we all won, maybe. I think there's only one group that really didn't win, and I think that was Wizards of the Coast. And I'm actually kind of sad about this. I think Wizards of the Coast, I don't have good data on this. I haven't run a giant, horizontal study of everybody in the world and say, hey, how do you feel about Wizards of the Coast? But the general impression I get is for the people who think about Wizards of the Coast at all, which could be a relatively small group when you consider all the people playing D&D. For the people who think about them all, I don't think the impression is very good. Most of the time when I hear Wizards of the Coast come up, it's almost always negative. There are definitely people who are fans of Wizards of the Coast. They're interested in the new hires. They're interested in what's going on with the company. And they generally like Wizards of the Coast. And I think it's like, we like Wizards of the Coast because we like D&D. And we want it all to be good, right? But I would say that generally speaking, I would expect that the reputation for Wizards of the Coast has not gotten significantly better, even after they did all of the things that they did by releasing it. Lots of people never forgot. Now, what's interesting, and another reason why I'm having this talk now, is that there's now people who have been playing RPGs who weren't playing when the OGL thing happened. They've only been playing afterwards, and they don't know about any of this stuff. And that might be fine, right? I think it's worth knowing what happened. And I think if you're into the community at all, you're going to hear about it. And the best way to learn about it, by the way, I gave my little summary, but I'm going to link to a Wikipedia article that talks about it. And the Wikipedia article is really good. So read the Wikipedia article and you'll learn a lot about it. But I don't think their reputation as a company, as a steward of D&D, has gotten significantly better. And I would argue that that's an incorrect assumption, because I think they have been, by and large, a good steward of D&D and a good steward of the hobby. And the examples I'll give are, A, 5 different system reference documents for the 5.1 SRD released under a Creative Commons license in 5 different languages, and then doing the same thing with the new version of D&D. And if you think about the amount of money that they spent to design that new version of D&D and then release it under an open Creative Commons license, they didn't have to, and they did. Now, there was a direct commercial benefit for them to do so, which we're going to get into. So there was a reason why it was definitely useful for them to release that under that license, not just out of the goodness of their hearts. But they did, and it is under that open license that we can use. So that, I think, is good. I think the idea that they released the new rule set on virtual tabletop platforms beyond just their own is an example of how they are supporting a wider range. It's on Roll20, it's on Fantasy Grounds, it's on Foundry. Now, again, it's not like they gave it away for free. They're getting royalties from that. They're getting money back. Every time somebody buys it on a system, they get money back. They're continuing to publish physical books. So we're buying physical books. When you buy it, you own it. That's all great. So, and if I look at like what they've done in the last 3 years, I don't have many examples, particularly with D&D, to go, wow, there's something they did that I think was really not good. That was, nothing's going to be at the level of the OGL, but something you look at like that was bad. And I keep a pretty hard eye on them, right? I kind of watch what they do because I'm curious about the kind of stuff they do. So I would say, now, the reality is most people aren't thinking about Wizards of the Coast at all. They're going and playing D&D, they're buying D&D, they're thinking about D&D, and that's all they do. And they don't know anything about what's going on in the company, that's fine. We don't know how big that group is. We don't know what's going on. So who knows, right? But I think generally speaking, for the people who are considering Wizards of the Coast role in the hobby at all, the general reputation is not good. However, Wizards of the Coast definitely won the OGL war in another way. Right? When they say we all won, they won in another direction. They got almost exactly what they wanted. And they did it in a much more carrot instead of stick way. And if they had just done this, it would have been a very different world in the RPG space than it is, which is one of the big reasons that they were pulling back the OGL. One of the things that they wanted to try to do was they wanted a taste of material getting published. They looked at it and said, there's these $1 million Kickstarters regularly happening that are based on material we put out and we're not getting anything for it. And we want to get something for it. Well, guess what? Now they're getting something for it. And they're getting for it in a different way, which is they are opening up their D&D Beyond platform to third-party publishers, to partner publishers, to be able to publish their stuff on D&D Beyond. And then they get a percentage of the stuff sold on D&D Beyond. And my bet is that they're making a much higher percentage of the stuff that they're selling on D&D Beyond than they would have gotten from the original OGL. Now, granted, the publishers who publish on D&D Beyond can also publish elsewhere and don't have to pay royalties to Wizards on the stuff they're selling outside of that platform. But what I've heard from publishers, it's very lucrative. They're making really good money with the products that they're selling on D&D Beyond, right? There's good money there, even with whatever the percentage cut is that Wizards of the Coast is taking, which is probably pretty significant. So publishers, instead of being really mad at Wizards of the Coast for trying to deauthorize the OGL, are now scrambling to try to get their stuff published on D&D Beyond. And I think that's at their peril, because I think when you are basically handing over a good chunk of your business to a competitor. because Wizards of the Coast in the end is a competitor. If you're making an RPG product, Wizards of the Coast also makes RPG products, and they're a competitor of yours. And you're giving them a lot of different stuff. You're giving them all the data that they need to have about the sales of your product. You're giving them all of the customers that they like. I guarantee you, they're not giving you a customer list back. If you're publishing on D&D Beyond, I am 95% sure, maybe higher, that they are not saying, oh, hey, by the way, here's everybody who bought your stuff. You could put them on your mail list. That ain't happening. But they do get to put them on their mail list, right? So you are handing over this stuff to the competitor. But the money is so good, publishers are still willing to do it. That's one area where Wizards of the Coast won. And publishers would say they won too. And there are customers who say they won because, hey, we get to have our stuff in D&D Beyond now. We like D&D Beyond. However, I think that is creating a brittle structure, because then you're at the whim of everything that's on D&D Beyond. Okay, besides all of that, what could Wizards of the Coast do to improve their reputation? I don't know. The answer is I don't have a great answer. However, I have a few thoughts. And some of these thoughts I got from talking to other folks about it, some of it from the Sly Flourish Discord server. You know, what are some of the things they can do? Some of them are just, and they're not just my thing, but there's some things where I'm like, I bet you this isn't as big a thing as it would matter, but I think it's important to me. One of them is just be a part of the community. And by that, I mean, like, have the folks that work on D&D go to conventions, run games, talk to people, listen to people, you know, visit panels, go and just be part of the community. One of the things I think that happens with Wizards of the Coast is they know how big they are and they act like big shots. And so they're apprehensive about going to conventions, and they're apprehensive about having their designers just talk to people, go on podcasts, just, you know, get out there, right? And be like regular people. What are all of the other designers I know are dying to get on shows to talk to them. But Wizards, you got to go through 3 layers of management in order to have a talk with anybody. It's the only one that's like that, right? Get out there, listen to people, go. And you don't have to have big presences. Just be there. Have the people who love the game be there. Have them talk about what they love in the game. Have them run the game. And they've done this. Like, I've seen them at conventions. I've seen folks from Wizards of the Coast at conventions. I've seen them run games. And it's, you know, that I think is a big piece. In-store programs. Now, there are rumors circulating about. I've seen screenshots. No, there were no NDAs signed apparently for any of this. There was apparently a new D&D Encounters-like event. I think Wizards of the Coast is involved. I'm not even really sure, but I can tell you the material looks like Wizards of the Coast is involved, of some kind of new in-store program. That's great, right? Expanding to local game shops, really supporting it, getting people to want to play the game in local game shops, and then, you know, being there, just being part of that, expanding it, I think could really help. Make good products. I'm not arguing. Like, we could argue all day long about what the previous products over the past 3 years, whether they've been good or bad. I have my own opinions. Other people have their opinions about which ones are good and bad. But focusing down on what D&D is, right, and what kind of things you make, making good products that people are excited about, that people want to play, without trying to blow them up into something big. There's always like these marketing tie-ins. Descent into Avernus was a mess because they were trying to tie into Baldur's Gate. You know, quit trying to like connect everything together to try to capitalize on the next thing, and just focus on making a good product. You don't need to put Karlach on the copy on the front cover of every book you make. You just don't, right? Like, just instead of worrying about trying to connect to the things that have happened before, make the new things that are going to get people excited in the future, instead of kind of hanging on to the things that made them excited in the past. Try different things, but make good products. Here's my big one. Put out PDFs of 5th edition D&D material. Right? You don't own anything you're buying on D&D Beyond. It says it in a license agreement. You have some kind of limited license that they can take back. You have Darth Vader EULA, where they, you know, pray I don't, you know, I've changed the rules, pray I don't change them anymore, right? Is the license agreement you have with everything you quote unquote buy on D&D Beyond. How about you sell me a real product, right? Also, you're leaving money on the table, right? I guarantee, I have bad news. I have really bad news. Your stuff's already being pirated like crazy. Right? It is. It's already out there. There are PDFs. This is the sad truth. There are already PDFs of 5th edition material in lots of different places. You're just not getting any money for it. So this is your OGL situation. Do you want money from all the PDFs that are out there? Put out legal PDFs. Put out PDFs that we can own and feel good about it, right? That it's just money on the table. You're just leaving money on the table. And you can tell, because I guarantee you're making good money. This is you, Wizards of the Coast. I don't know if you're listening. If you are, if you're making good money for all of the previous D&D material that's available in PDF. I guarantee you that money isn't zero. I bet you're making money every month on all of the old D&D material that's being sold on D&D Beyond. Or not D&D Beyond, on DM's Guild and on Drive-Thru-RPG. Put out PDFs, man. First of all, you get money. Second of all, you look great because you're actually supporting the community. This is something that we've been asking for forever. And third, we would have a legitimate access to the stuff. Behave like a member of the industry, not the industry itself. Right? This is kind of back to being human. Just take a humble approach to the hobby. I think Wizards definitely did so after the OGL. And I think they're doing so now. And the people that I've been talking to, I'm definitely getting this impression. They're not just throwing their weight around like big shots. They recognize this stuff. So take that human approach to the hobby. Remember who we are. Remember what kind of products we're making, and be part of the community. Recognize there are a lot of other companies out there that are doing really good things. Look at those other companies and seeing what they're doing. That, I think, could be a big one. This is one, I posted my notes for this on EN World yesterday, and I got a lot of good feedback from folks in EN World. I'll link to it because I think it was interesting conversations. And lots of people brought this up, and I kind of haven't been paying a lot of attention to it. I did mention it. There's no 3.5 SRD in the Creative Commons. Wizards of the Coast did say they were going to do that. They said they were going to release the 3.5 SRD in the Creative Commons. The 3.5 SRD is the rule set for 3rd edition of D&D. Personally, I don't think it's nearly as important as people think it is, but it is a promise that Wizards made. And honestly, I don't know why they're not keeping it up, because it should be pretty straightforward to do. I think the problem is they have to reformat everything that's inside. It was all a bunch of RTF files. It wasn't even PDF. So there isn't even a PDF they could just put the stamp on and be done. They'd have to go through it. And there was some stuff that was released under some of the earlier SRDs when they put them out in the Creative Commons. They're like, oh man, we really shouldn't have put that under Creative Commons, right? So I think they want to go through it again. And also, this is the other big one. There's no commercial value to Wizards to do that. There was for putting out the 5.1 and 5.2 SRDs, which is people making 5th edition compatible material, benefited Wizards because they're still publishing 5th edition material. People publishing material for the 3rd edition of D&D doesn't help Wizards at all. So there's definitely a reason why they're not doing it, but they did promise they would do it, and they haven't fulfilled that promise. So if they did so, I know there's definitely a group of people who would say, hey, they said they were going to do it and they didn't do it, and now they did it, and now we're happier. So that'd be something that they could do. And honestly, it's out there already, right? The 3.5 SRD is already under the Creative Commons license. It's already out under a license. I think they literally could just slap a Creative Commons license and it'd be done. But what do I know? I would love to know what you think the Wizards could do to improve their reputation. And, again, right, I've worked with them, right? I've worked with them in the past, so keep that in consideration. But I'm curious, what it would actually take. I really don't know, because I don't have all the answers to all of this. And for some people, I think the answer is nothing. I don't think that there's anything they can do for some people. But I'm curious about what other people could do. However, it's taking that step back. The whole reason to even have this conversation is because I think we are in the best timeline. Right? When it comes to RPGs, when I look at it, I try to, I don't think it's valuable. I don't think it even matters to try to think what would have happened if that had never occurred, if the OGL catastrophe had never happened. But looking at it now, it's hard for me to imagine a situation that is better than what we have today, where we have stronger licenses for more open content, where we have tons of different RPGs that we can play from tons of different publishers. This hobby is fantastic, right? And we're in such a great state. And when you look at a lot of sort of other entertainment platforms that are going on, when you look at one of the reasons why I get so bent out of shape about things like D&D Beyond, and I get bent out of shape about things like PDFs, is because we're watching platform decay everywhere else, right? We're watching giant corporations just screwing people and harming people on these massive tech platforms with no repercussions and no recourse at all, right? And this hobby is one, and I think it's one of the reasons why it's as popular as it is, that breaks away from that, where it's just me and my friends and our books and our pens and our pencils, maybe one of several different virtual tabletops that we're using, getting together, having fun, building real strong bonds with one another, and enjoying our time together in a way that I think a lot of other hobbies don't have. And I think we're in a fantastic spot for RPGs. Because of X, you know why. The original title for this kind of idea was Connect Characters to the Fiction with Second-Person Narration. That didn't exactly roll off the tongue, but that's really what I'm talking about. Second-person narration, just in case you don't know, is when you describe things to the perspective of the person you're talking to. That the sand skiffs are built really well. And the idea of because of X, you know why, is instead of us pouring out narrative about a world, instead of saying the sand skiffs that travel across the Sarkland Desert are these really well-built things, that doesn't connect the characters to them at all. But instead, if you say, Mateo, because you're a mechanist, when you look at the sand skiffs and the construction of the sand skiffs, two things jump out to you. One is you can tell that they have been built this way for centuries. You know that the kind of technology that went behind building these ships that can travel across the desert sands have been around for many centuries. And it's also really advanced, right? You know, places in the world aren't nearly this advanced, right? Those are things your character knows because you're a mechanist. And the difference when you say something like that to a player is profound. They feel like they've done something. They feel like they're connected. The choice they made in the character that they picked matters because of things that they're learning about the world. It is a really powerful trick, very simple to do. Because of X, you know Y is a tool that you can drop in your toolbox that allows you to drop this second-person narration into your games that directly ties the characters into the game itself. Here are 3 other examples. Because you're a hunter, you know that something is corrupting the Magna Woods, something definitely not natural. Because you're a knight, you know that the hero Eladane defeated the demon Sathmog with a sword empowered with part of his own soul. Because you're trained in Arcana, you know that the glyphs on this stone can be manipulated, enhancing magical spells if manipulated correctly. Those are like 3 examples of how you can take some information, but drop it in the context of the character themselves so that they feel like they've done something. They feel like, and they have, right? They made a choice of their character of training in Arcana or becoming a knight or becoming a hunter. They have these things that because of the choices they made, they learn something about the world. And I'll tell you, it really transforms players who are kind of sitting back passively listening to you go on and on about the paths of the demon cults and the history of the world, and instead be like, wow, I know something. And they'll write it down like my character knows this thing, right? So it's a great way to kind of break away from just spewing pure narrative, getting into it. And this is a very common problem. We GMs contain multitudes. We contain worlds that we're constantly putting out there, and we want to tell them all this stuff, right? We want to tell them all of these things, and we don't even look them in the eye. We're looking up at that ceiling and talking about the Dragon Empire and the 1,000-year history and the Marat contract and all this stuff. I'm into my Dragon Empire game, if you can't tell, right? That is, that's something that we... It's very easy for us to get lost in that. And instead, when we transform it into, why do the characters know certain things? What traits of the characters allow that character to know this thing to be true? We change it. We also tend to shorten it too. It means that the information we're giving out is more focused on the character and is shorter because it's based on what the character knows. So we're also getting through things quicker. So when we think about step 1 of the 8 steps of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, step 1 is focus on the characters. Know the characters. Think about the characters. Right? Ponder the characters. I don't even remember the exact name, but put the characters first and foremost in your mind. And the intention is that the characters matter more than anything else going on in your world. So start with them and ask yourself, what can tie the characters to the game that's coming up? And there are lots of different things that we can review the characters. That's what it's called. There are lots of different things that we can review with characters. Here are examples of a bunch of things that we could review when we're reviewing the characters. Their names, in case you don't remember them. That's always a good one. Who are the names of the characters? If you can't remember them off the top of your head, spend more time. And that way, when you think about them, you can walk through all the characters. It's hard for me. I got 3 different groups. So I have 18 characters I have to keep in my head at a given time. Their class, their background, their species, and other details that they have. What are some information about those? What powers do they have that the players really like to use? What monsters might act as lightning rods for the powers that they've got, for the things that they enjoy doing? What magic items do they have currently, and what magic items would benefit them, or are they looking forward to? What stories did they describe during the last time you ran Campfire Tales? What stars and wishes did the players have? These are all different things that you can review. You don't have to review all of them every time you're sitting down to review the characters. That would probably take too long. But those are examples of some of the things that you can review when you're reviewing the characters. But one of my favorite things to do now, and I've been doing it a lot, and if you watch my RPG prep episodes, which you should totally be watching, I don't know why you're not. Probably you are. I don't know. 4/5 of you aren't. So go out there and watch some RPG prep. One of the things that I do is I ask myself, what could the character know that's going to tie them to the next session? That's a question that I ask, right? What kind of information could the character know about what's going on in this next session? And I essentially come up with a secret and clue for each of the characters that's focused on the character that ties them to something that's going on in the game. And those sort of character connections are these sort of second person connections. They are these, because of X, Y. Because Mateo, and that one I gave of Mateo and the sand skiff is an exact example. Another one would be Cal recognizes that the Sarkland Desert, though it looks like a dead land, that there's all kinds of life out there. Because she is a druid, she can feel the life that flows all throughout the desert. Some of it quite, beautiful, and some of it quite dark, right? She can feel it. Because Tolstoy is connected to the ley lines, he can tell that there's a very powerful and very old ley line connection that crosses over the Sarkland Desert. And if you look in the sky or you look in the sands, they always seem to be swirling that way. Those are sort of because of X, Y sort of connections. So add this tool into your GM toolbox. Add the idea of describing things in a second-person narrative. Because the character has some kind of thing or some trait or background or whatever, that's how they're able to know a certain thing about the game itself. So because of X, Y. Add it to your toolbox and give it a shot at your next game. Every quarter on the Sly Flourish Patreon, we have the Patreon Q&A. Every month, a patron can ask an RPG-related question. Every week on Fridays, I get my coffee, I sit down in my office, and I answer all of the questions that came in the past week. And then some of those questions I bring here to the show so that we can dive in a little deeper. Christian R. says, I am in the fortunate position of running for 2 active groups. They both independently asked me to run the same published adventure, Strixhaven. Do you have any advice on running the same campaign for 2 different groups at the same time? I know you did this with Rime of the Frost Maiden, and I was hoping you had some lessons to share based on that experience. I'll obviously get to the benefit of getting to run encounters the second time for the group that is further behind, which will allow me to tailor them a bit. Thanks, and I'm using Forge of Foes to add cool monsters. Thank you for using Forge of Foes, and thank you for your questions. Great question. I really loved running the same campaign for multiple groups, and I did so in a few different ways. I ran published campaign settings like Rime of the Frost Maiden and Tomb of Annihilation and a few others that I ran multiple groups through at the same time. I actually did quite a few of them. And then I also ran homebrew adventures, where the seed of the adventure was the same for both groups, but I let each group act independently. Probably my number one tip is to allow both groups to navigate those campaigns their own way. Like, don't try to push them to do the same things. Don't get caught railroading them because one group did it one way, you expect the other group to do it the same way, and so you lean in that way, and then they're both going that way. I found tremendous entertainment in watching how they diverged. I loved how they forked off, and they will fork in different ways pretty quickly if my campaigns are any example. In my circumstances, they almost always pick totally different paths, and the campaigns went in totally different ways, and I loved them both. There was definitely value in being able to cross-prep. There were still things that I could cross-prep that worked well. A lot of bigger things, so not usually like entire dungeons or specific encounters, but more like the lore of the session or bigger events that were going on or NPCs. There was a lot of the bigger components of a campaign that I could kind of put in my head and recognize that they had value to both games, even though the paths that the characters were taking across those campaigns went on very different paths. So I really liked it. So my number one guidance to you would be make sure to allow and enjoy the different paths that the characters take. Don't try to put them together. The other thing I would recommend, which I often hear players wanting to, or GMs wanting to do, is to somehow combine both campaigns together so that both groups are living in the same world. I haven't tried it, and I think there might be some groups and sometimes where there's some real magic that comes from that, but that also sounds really hard. And we all know I'm a lazy DM. I don't do hard things. I try to find easy things to do that bring us a lot of joy. And I think it's way easier to just fork the two worlds into two separate worlds and let them go their own way. I think trying to manipulate them or merge them together and everything like that, I think you're asking for a lot of extra complications. So I would probably avoid that. But my number one thing was let them diverge and enjoy how different the two campaigns are, even though you're running the same world, because I really did. I like them a lot. Bryden M says, do you have any advice for pausing a quest chain? My paladin is close to capturing the first of a gang of villains who murdered his family. I originally thought it'd be fun to catch the lowest guy in the gang, work his way up to the lieutenants, and finally the gang mastermind, but now I'm afraid it would give him too long a personal quest, hogging the spotlight from other players. Can you give me any advice for the best ways to step away from this player's quest and come back later, and or how to balance the needs of the narrative with the need to share the spotlight among the players? Really good question and a good idea. One thing, so there's one, I'm all about the tools, right? Our big GM toolboxes. And there's a huge GM tool for your toolbox. Talk to your players. Talk to your players directly instead of talking in character all the time. And one of the things you can say to them is, at this current stage in your quest, you've learned everything you can learn. New information will come to light later, but right now, the quest is, you don't have a new lead for it, right? And there isn't a new lead to go get. So that way the player's not like, well, can I go investigate further? You think you've investigated as far as... This is the same thing like when they're exploring a room, right? You can tell them, you have explored this room as thoroughly as you can, right? And you say that, and then they're like, okay, I guess there's nothing more to do, and they move on. You can do the same kind of thing here, which is you have explored this quest line as much as you currently can. You think you're going to need new evidence in order to move forward. You can also have sort of NPCs that are working with the character to say, I will go investigate for you this forward. Meanwhile, why don't you go do this other thing? Right? And so the way to do a side quest is you have like NPC allies who say, we are going to go find out who the next lieutenant is. You gave us the information on the previous lieutenant. You gave us this information. We're going to take it from here. And when we find out who's next in line, we'll come back to you and let you know. And that's a way to pause the quest line and then move on to other adventures. And then later on, you can bring them back in again and have new evidence come to light that moves the story forward. But I would really, but also tell your players exactly what you're doing, right? Say, hey, just to make sure that we're not having an entire quest chain that's focusing on one player, we're going to have regular pauses on that quest line to go do other things, right? And maybe even have some quests for the other characters too, so that they don't feel like only that one guy had his specialized quest and everybody else is just doing general stuff. You could have other players' quest lines too. I also wouldn't have too many of these. 2 or 3 quests for one character, that's okay. Too many of them, not great. Even better is if you can take some of the other angles of this quest and interweave it into the larger story. Like the lieutenants and the boss are actually working for a larger group that the characters are interested in solving, and they face that boss in the middle of another adventure. So you don't have like 4 quests that are just focused on one character, right? You can instead interweave. I did this in my game. I had lots of character connections, but many times they would run into allies or previous allies or villains in the middle of other quests that they were doing for larger purposes as well. It was a good way for the player to get closure on their quest and to have kind of connections of their things going, but the other players didn't mind because they were also involved doing other things that they did. But again, a big one, talk to your players, right? And explain what you're doing so that they understand how all of this is working along. Jackson F says, how do you go about integrating features from multiple versions of 5e into your game? I've picked up some Level Up Advanced 5e books, and I love a lot of the features from Trials and Treasure, as well as additional skills, combat options, and spells in the Adventurer's Guide. I love Flea Mortals and how they design action-oriented monsters. Overall, I enjoy D&D 2024, feel most confident with it as a rule set, and feel it gives the best player options. Is it better to make my own Frankenstein D&D with all of the homebrew books and things that I want, or have a streamlined game and stick to easy-to-follow rules? Good question. You are right on that the cusp of the wondrous world of homebrewing stuff and where we homebrew stuff. And the answer is yes, you should homebrew when there are particular things that we can do that we'll talk about. But homebrewing is fine. Homebrewing is good. It's your game now. You get to do whatever you want, right? As long as you and your players are happy, you get to do anything you want. And boy, I have thrown the kitchen sink in my different 5e games. I have things that I'm taking from other games that will always be there regardless of what version of 5e I play. For example, the luck system and doom points, which I call dreadful blessings. From Tales of the Valiant, I'm now putting them in all my 5e games. It's so funny because I was playing Tales of the Valiant and I was like, oh yeah, I've been homebrewing the luck system. Like, no, it's actually in this system. It came from this system. So there are definitely things you can do. The easiest things to homebrew, however, there's a lot of different kind of stuff that you can do. And some of it can be very difficult to handle and some of it can be very easy to handle. Examples of easy things. Little things you can do on the GM side of the screen that don't change the whole game except for just right now. An example is, you mentioned, no, you didn't. The previous guy mentioned Forge of Foes, but we'll mention Forge of Foes, right? If you want to have like a really simple monster that's just built on like a stat line, you can drop one monster in one battle that uses a Forge of Foes stat block and just see how it plays out. If it works for you, hey, that worked out. If it didn't, no one notices. My players never noticed when I was using an officially published monster or using a Forge of Foes one. They didn't notice, right? They really didn't. 20 levels we played through. We played 20 level 5e games. I was using a mixture of Forge of Foes and published monsters. They never could tell the difference, right? So there's lots of things that you can drop in on the GM side, particularly things you can drop in on the GM side and try once. And if it works, great, and you can try it again later. If it doesn't work, you never have to touch it again, and it didn't affect your game. Those are really good ones. Things like interesting environmental effects, new monster powers. You talked about action-oriented monsters. You can try an action-oriented monster, see how it works out, right? If it works out, great. Maybe you use one later. They're only affecting the one situation that's occurring now. You're not making a major change to the game. You're not committing to anything. Like this is one of the things I think is really powerful as a GM. Is you don't have to commit to anything. You don't have to say I'm going to run D&D 2024 rules on the GM side. I'm never going to deviate. I mean, you could say that, but you don't need to. Instead, you're like, I'll try whatever I'm going to try. Right? I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do on this side of the screen. On the game I'm playing over here as a GM, I can do anything I want, and I can try anything I want, and as long as it's fun. And as long as the game, I'm not hurting players, I'm not breaking trust, I'm not doing things, I could try all kinds of things. I think that could really work well. When you start to get into homebrewing stuff for characters, now you got to be a little bit more careful because you could do a couple of things. You could homebrew something like, hey, I really don't want you to do X, and now their game enjoyment is less. Or you give them something, and now they have it forever, and you're like, oh man, that was a mistake. So there are examples, these aren't even like homebrew examples, but like if you think about the enspelled weapons that are in D&D 2024, if you say, for example, there's a really bad combination that exists inside D&D 2024, which is you can craft items pretty cheaply. And if you open up crafting, you can make things like armor that has the shield spell on it that you can cast 6 times a day. Now that's permanent, right? They have that forever. I made a mistake last week. This is pretty funny. I made a mistake in my game last week where I gave out a single-use magic item. This is something that's a homebrew thing that I do. I recommend it. I think it's really great. You give a magic item to the characters that has a single-use spell on it that they can do once. And I gave them Meteor Swarm on that single use, which I think is great because it's like a nuclear bomb. It was given to one of their sons. It was a gift from an ancient dragon to one of their children. And it was like her protector, like, if you ever need this, you can use this. And I accidentally said 1 time per day. And the whole group was like, oh, right? And I was like, oh, no, I meant, sorry, just once. And they went, oh. And I was like, I gave, because they were like 1 time per day. They're like, oh, that would be the end of this campaign, right? Because like if you have Meteor Swarm every day, 9th level spell, that would be really bad. So that's an example of like, I said 2 words per day that could have radically altered the game. And I had to immediately pull them back, realizing, oh, that was dumb. So when you start to homebrew things on the character side, that's when you got to be more careful about what kind of effect you're having. Are you making your players happy? Are you making them sad? Are you making them too happy? And it's going to end up ruining the game. And if you think about every magic item you hand out is kind of a little thing like that, right? Everyone, you have to say like, what's the impact? I'll give an example. I never give out shields that have magical bonuses on them. Never have. 10 years, 11 years I've been running 5e. I'm not going to do it. You know why? Their armor class is already too good, right? Character armor class is already too high. If you start to give them shields with plus bonuses, it's even worse, right? Because shields are already really good. And then you're adding plus bonuses on it. And that plus bonus stacks with magical armor plus bonuses. My other dirty trick is I generally don't give armor a bonus that goes up above 18, no matter what. So I will give +3 on like studded leather, but I'm not going to give +3 onto plate. Right? Plate does, maybe I'll give like a +1 plate, but generally speaking, I'll give something else on plate armor. That's a little house rule I do, but it's a house rule I know because I know armor class is already overly exemplified in 5e, and I don't want armor to be too good. Is that a house rule? I don't know. But if you start to, manipulate things a little bit too much and you start to give things to characters too much, you're going to have to live with that for the rest of your campaign. So that's something to consider. So there's a lot of little tricks about how to make sure that the kind of stuff you're homebrewing is stuff that's making the game better, that's not going to break the game. But particularly anything that you can do temporarily on the GM side is fantastic. Like your world is wide open on your side. So I hope that helps. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today while we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And if you want more stuff like this, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. There's a link down in the show notes to do so. You get a free adventure generator PDF and a free RPG-related article sent directly to your inbox. You can also support me directly on Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of awesome stuff. You get new supplements for City of Arches. You get the Readings and Reflections podcast. You get access to our dedicated Discord server. You get access to the 5e artisanal database. Tons of stuff you get. Really good deal. You should totally check it out. And you can pick up any of my books for you and your friends. You know, you can pick up Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master and bring it to one of your favorite GMs in your life. If you think it was valuable to you, it could be valuable to them too. You can pick that up on the Sly Flourish Bookstore. Links for all of that are in the show notes. Thank you so much. Have a great day and get out there and play an RPG.